Now, America, with Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. And now, Archbishop Sheen.
Fellow Americans, you know that I am giving a series of 13 on What Now America, different phases and moods of American life. This particular telecast is concerned with youth, its hopes and its failures. Now, it's not about children. Sometimes I wish it were, because there are more interesting stories that one can tell about children. I remember last Christmas I was visiting a family, and two little girls were quarreling about which had the more important part in a Christmas play. And one finally won, saying, "You know very well it's much harder to play the part of a virgin than an angel." And I heard of a boy who was in a school, and he was not doing too well, and he came home with a report card, and he said to his parents, he said, "You know, I'm an ordinary son of an ordinary father and an ordinary mother. Why do you expect an extraordinary report card?" And another boy, when the report card came home, said to his father, "Dad, do you want me to go up in the attic and find some of your old report cards?" But it's not about youth. It is about youth, about adolescence. Now, we're worried about youth, but they will grow up, get married, have children, and they'll worry very much about the next generation. Adolescence is that period when it is impossible for a young man to believe that someday he will grow up to be as dumb as his father. What makes our problem of youth a little different, perhaps, than any other people's is the fact that we have the longest juvenility in the world. When do we grow up? When does a boy become a man? When does a girl become a woman? Among the primitive peoples, there were puberty rites. And when a boy, for example, was initiated, he could say, "Yesterday I was a boy. Today I am a man." He had crossed a line. He was mature. And among the Jewish people, about the age of 12 or 13, there was such a thing as being made a son of the commandments. He was old enough to teach. But with us, there's a crisscrossing. The young, some of them never seem to grow up. Some of the old have a kind of a synthetic juvenility. The other day on Fifth Avenue, I saw a man stopping to look in the window of Lord and Taylor. And he had long hair, about 60, maybe 62 or 3. And they were brushed forward. They had been blown forward by the wind. And he looked in the window and pulled them all back so that they hung on his shoulders. He was young again, though he was about 50. Now, why is it we don't grow up in this country? Why is there no maturity? Well, how do we become mature? We become mature when we are under necessity. Necessity. Physical necessity or moral necessity? Physical necessity. The need to earn one's own living. The older generation had to do that. Now, parents do not so much as raise children, they finance them. The spending capacity of the young in the United States has been estimated at $13 billion. They're affluent. And this creates a tremendous tension in them because they're very idealistic by nature. And while they want to devote themselves to social causes and to industrial justice, and governmental order and so forth, they're very conscious of the fact that they're affluent and they're supported. And because they are not under the necessity of earning their living, they're not mature. Something else that matures even more is moral necessity. Being under duty, being responsible, having consciousness, for example, that one has to render an account to God. Then one matures rather quickly. There's a goal and one has to work for it. But today, instead of being under a moral necessity, there's a conformism. Believe me, the youth today have an establishment that is very difficult to crash. You have to conform to this establishment, to the way they dress, the way they talk, the heroes, and God help you if you break out of that establishment. And this conformism, you see, does not give them an opportunity to express their individuality at an age when they are away from the tutelage of their parents and they should develop their own personality. So we're not growing up because we have no great responsibilities. But one can't always talk of youth in general, any more than you can talk of adults. I think the youths are very much like satellites. Here is the solar system. And I'm going to compare this to modern youth and to indicate how many different kinds of youth there are in our culture. Here, for example, is the sun. That is light. That is truth. That is centric. Around it, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and maybe Pluto. You know, about the only thing that I can draw half well is a circle. Now, youth, I say, is very much like the satellites. Some are close to light, to power, to truth. Others are far away from it. Now, there are not many that are way off, but there are some that are way off. And I'm going to take those that are way off first. Now, they fit into a pattern. They have what is known as the PIP syndrome. P is for permissiveness. I is for instancy. P is for pleasure. The youths of our country that are way out, far away from warmth and light, they first of all are given to permissiveness. There must be no limit, no boundary. Freedom is determined by the right to break boundaries. That is one of the reasons why today freedom is sometimes described as the anti-holy. I must have nothing to limit me. Any authority, nature, God, that restricts my freedom. When I wonder, did we in America ever get into this idea that freedom means having no boundaries and no limits? You know, I think it began on the 6th of August, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., when we dropped a bomb on Hiroshima. That blotted out boundaries. The boundary of America, that was the aid of nations and the nations that were helped. It blotted out the boundary between life and death, where the victims of nuclear incineration, among them even the living, were dead. It blotted out the boundary between the civilian and the military. And somehow or other, from that day on in our American life, we said we want no limits and no boundaries. And this is the characteristic of the youth that are in this outer circle. There are not many of them. Then the I is for instancy. They're all Spock-marked. They're all raised by Dr. Smock. If the baby cries, give him his bottle. Well, they never got over that. So everything has to be done instantly. Stop pollution now. Close universities now. Stop dishonesty now. Break up trusts now. And so they say they have no interest in anything that is past. I was talking to some students in the university, and one of them said, I hate the past. I hate history. I hate governments. I hate churches. I hate law, because all of these are concerned with the past. I have no bounds to the past. I said, listen, when you undress tonight, you look and see if you have a navel. And if you do, you're tied to the past. And then, pleasure. Do it for kicks. Take dope. Fornication. The ultimate goal of life is fun and pleasure. This is the PIP syndrome. And it belongs only to a few in the outer circle. Now we come to the real youth of America. And many, many more close to light and heat than those who are far away. First of all, I should like to say about them, they are accused of being anti-religious, anti-religion. No, they're not. Let us not misjudge them. We of another generation are saying they will have nothing to do with the church and nothing to do with God. That is not true. Do you know what they're opposed to? They're opposed not to religion, but to the religious. They're opposed to men and women of God who do not believe in the product they sell. They're sick and tired of ministers and rabbis and priests will never get down on their knees. They will follow anyone who has the faith. They can discover the phonies and discover the phonies quickly. Believe me, I have deep sympathy for them in this respect. They are not staying away. We've driven them away. And just as soon as we become what we're supposed to be, they will come back. As an English novelist put it, I tell you, Hapgood, that plumb down in the crypt and abyss of every man's soul is a hunger, a craving for other food than this earthly stuff. And the churches know it. And instead of reaching down to him what he wants, light, instead of that, they invite him to dancing and picture shows. And you're a jolly good fellow, and religion's a jolly fine thing. And we can get it all, and religion is not a spoiled sport. He can get all of that out of the side of the churches and get it better. He wants light, Hapgood. And the padres come down and drink beer with him and sing music hall songs with him and dance jazz with him and say they are lifting their hearts up to God by showing that religion is not incompatible with having a jazz time. And there's no God there that a man can be lifted up to. Hapgood, a man wouldn't care what he had to give up if he knew he was making for something precious. But he doesn't know it. Light, that is what he wants. And the longer it's withheld from him, the lower he will sink. We have too many who are afraid of being unloved. Too many leaders of youth. We go down to them instead of lifting them up. And I commend the youth for this judgment. And a second judgment in favor of the youth in the inner circle. They've not received much from the older generation. They see their parents with a double standard, triple standard, popping cocktails before meals, so they say, why not pop pills? What's the difference? How many a parent you have heard who has said, I don't know why that son of mine ever became a hippie. I gave him everything he wanted. That's precisely the trouble. They gave them everything they wanted. And so really they're not in rebellion against their parents, they're in rebellion against the poor ethics and morals and judgment of their parents. And then, finally, we must never give up hope about the youth. Never. Just let many go back and examine their own youth. Believe me, they changed. And I know so many instances of how youth has changed that I cannot give up faith in them. In the middle of the 19th century, there were two altar boys in the cathedral in Italy. And they were about to go into a procession. And each of them was given a large candlestick. And in Italy, they're tremendously heavy brass things. One of the boys' name was Della Ginga, and the other was named Castiglione. And they got into a fight as to who should be on the right side. And finally, Castiglione picked up this big brass candlestick and cracked the head of Della Ginga. Well, the people in the church shrieked, send them out. They'll never be any good. Well, In 1825, there was a Jubilee year in Rome, and there's a ceremony for the opening of the door of St. Peter's. The Holy Father will take a hammer and pound on the door. And Leo the XII was then the pontiff, and he needed a hammer to knock on the door in a symbolic, ritualistic gesture. And Leo the XII, who was Deleginga, turned to the cardinal and said, "The hammer, please." And then, "Do you remember the time you cracked me over the head with a candlestick?" That was Cardinal Castiglione. And when Leo the XII died, Castiglione was his successor as Pope. Now, the moral of this story is not to crack other young men over the head with candlesticks. But I just want to give you a little hope about them. I had a young man who came to see me. He boasted of the fact that he was an atheist and therefore had no one to thank. And I could do nothing with him. 2 years later, he came back and he said, "Would you help support something that I have started in Mexico? I have opened a school and this clinic, and I have invited doctors down to supply this clinic for about 2 months a year, and I'm gathering all of the poor children into the school and the clinic." And I said, "What made the change?" He discovered his neighbor. And then he discovered his God. Never give up hope. I was in the Statler Hotel in Boston one day for lunch. And in those days, there were 2 great, gigantic purple curtains in the entrance of the dining room. A shoeshine boy came in with a D shirt, not T, D, dirty. And he had a shoeshine box over his shoulder. Well, he started swinging on those drapes. Can you imagine the consternation of the head waiter of the Statler? Immediately bounded out, shrieking at the young man, chased him out on the street. I left my dinner, and I went out to the boy, and I said, "Where do you go to school?" He said, "I don't go to school." "Why not?" "I was kicked out." "I can get you back." He said, "Who are you?" "Well," I said, "I can't tell you who I am, but I can get you back. So let's go to the school." So I went to the school, and I said to the principal, there were 3 young men once who were expelled from school. One because he was always drawing pictures in geography class. Second one because he was always fighting. And the third because he kept dirty books under the mattress. And I am sure that if those teachers had a chance to bring back those boys again, they would never have expelled them from school. The first of the boys, one who was always drawing pictures, was Hitler. The fighter was Mussolini, and the one who had dirty books under his mattress was Stalin. We didn't give them a chance. So there's hope. How much time have I? About 3 minutes left? Because, you see, I don't have notes, and I have to just improvise, and I get so nervous, as you can see. We have about 3 minutes. Well, 3 minutes. I have time to tell you a story of how sometimes elders act in relationship to youth. One boy dropped a cruet on the marble altar of a cathedral while he was serving Mass. Well, there's no atomic explosion that can equal in in intensity of decibels, the explosion of a cruet in front of the bishop in the cathedral. So this boy went in and the bishop said to him, "Come here. Where are you going to school when you get big?" He said, "I will tell you where to go. You go to Louvain University in Belgium. And someday you'll be like just as I am." Another boy broke cruets. Priest said to him, "Get out and never come back." I'm that first boy. You know who the second is? Tito. Now summing it up. Let us go back to our outer circle. Do you know what's going to happen to these people on the outer circle belonging to the PIP syndrome? When they grow up, they who are at present so rebellious against any kind of law, they're going to be tyrants, dictators. I have seen so many young men who were against all kinds of authority and responsibility. When they grew up, they became impossible to live with. And God help us when these men insist on respect for law. And the others, they're going to grow better and stronger. And this is going to be the hope of America. I have great faith in them. And because I am so tremendously interested in America, and you are, I know that you will trust them too. For I am absolutely convinced that these young men in an inner circle are going to be better Americans than we are.